The church bells tolled, but they couldn't drown out the scream of a child's voice piercing the sacred silence. "Please, don't marry her. Marry my uncle." The words hung in the air, sharp as broken glass, as every head in the ornate Virginia chapel turned toward the small figure standing in the aisle. 6-year-old Tommy, with his tousled blonde hair and tear-streaked face, clutched a crumpled drawing of two stick figures holding hands, one labeled Uncle James, the other Mr. Ethan. Ethan Caldwell froze at the altar, his tailored suit suddenly feeling too tight. Beside him, his fiancée, Clara, gasped, her white dress trembling as her bouquet slipped to the floor. The congregation murmured, a wave of shock rippling through the pews. Ethan's heart thudded, not from the joy of his wedding day, but from the ghost of a love he thought he'd buried 6 years ago. James Harper, Tommy's uncle, stood at the back of the church, his face pale as the boys' words dragged their past into the present. Ethan's eyes met James's across the room, and for a moment, the world dissolved. The guests, the flowers, Clara's stifled sob. It was just them, two boys from a small Virginia town, who'd once promised forever under a starlit sky. But promises like hearts could break. 6 years earlier, Ethan and James had been inseparable. High school sweethearts in a conservative town, they'd carved out a secret world in stolen moments. Late-night drives down empty country roads, whispers in the old oak grove, dreams of a life where they didn't have to hide. Ethan, with his easy charm and quarterback smile, was the golden boy everyone adored. James, quieter, with sharp blue eyes and a poet's soul, was the one who made Ethan feel alive. They'd planned to leave after graduation, to escape to a city where they could be themselves. But life had other plans. Ethan's father, a pastor with a voice like thunder, found them one night, tangled in each other's arms behind a barn. The fallout was brutal. Ethan was sent to a conversion camp, a place of cold showers and colder words, where they tried to fix him. James was ostracized, his family shunned by the town's tight-knit community. Under pressure, Ethan broke. He told James they were done, that he couldn't live like this. James left for college in New York, and Ethan stayed, burying his truth beneath a life he thought would please everyone else. Now, standing at the altar, Ethan felt the weight of that choice. Clara, kind and beautiful, had been his anchor these past years, a safe harbor in a storm of guilt. She deserved better than this moment, better than a groom whose heart was splitting open. Tommy's plea had torn the veil off Ethan's carefully constructed life, and the truth was bleeding out. "Ethan," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "What is he talking about?" Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked at Tommy, who was now clinging to James's leg, his small body shaking with sobs. James knelt, pulling the boy close, whispering something Ethan couldn't hear. The sight of them together, James's gentle strength, Tommy's unwavering trust, stirred something deep in Ethan's chest. A memory, James teaching a 4-year-old Tommy to ride a bike, laughing as they tumbled into the grass. Ethan had been there, watching, wishing he could freeze that moment forever. The minister cleared his throat, tried to regain control. "Perhaps we should take a moment." "No," Clara said, her voice sharp now. She turned to Ethan, her eyes searching his. "Tell me, now." Ethan's throat tightened. He owed her the truth, but how could he explain a love he'd spent years denying? How could he tell her that every time he smiled at her, a part of him was still reaching for James? The congregation waited, their whispers growing louder. Ethan felt their eyes like 1,000 needles, but none stung as much as Clara's. "I'm sorry," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to talk to James." The chapel erupted in gasps. Clara's face crumpled, and she turned, rushing down the aisle, her dress trailing like a ghost. Ethan wanted to run after her, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but his feet carried him toward James and Tommy instead. The boy looked up at him, eyes wide with hope, and Ethan felt his heart crack open. "Ethan," James said, his voice steady but laced with pain. You don't have to do this. But Ethan knew he did. For the first time in years, he felt the pull of something true. He reached for James's hand, and the world tilted. The reception hall was silent, the carefully planned celebration abandoned. Clara sat alone in the bridal suite, her dress pulled around her like spilled milk. She stared at the engagement ring on her finger, a diamond Ethan had chosen with such care. She'd known something was off, his late-night silences, the way his smiles never quite reach his eyes. But she convinced herself it was nerves. Now, the truth was a blade in her chest. She remembered meeting Ethan 3 years ago at a charity gala. He'd been charming, attentive, everything she thought she wanted. They'd build a life together, dinners with her parents, plans for a house by the lake. But there were moments, fleeting and strange, when she'd catch him staring into the distance, like he was chasing a memory she couldn't see. She'd ignored it, told herself love was enough. Now, she felt like a fool. Downstairs, Ethan and James sat on a bench outside, Tommy curled up asleep between them. The night was warm, the stars bright above the Virginia hills. Ethan's hands shook as he spoke. I thought I could do it, James. I thought I could be the man everyone wanted me to be. James's jaw tightened. You broke us, Ethan. You chose them over me. I know, Ethan said, his voice raw. I was scared. I thought if I let you go, I could fix myself. But I was wrong. James looked at him, his eyes softening but guarded. And Clara? What about her? Ethan's chest ached. She's everything good in this world. But I can't keep lying to her, or to myself. I love you, James. I never stopped. The words hung between them, heavy with years of pain and unspoken longing. James reached for Tommy's small hand, as if grounding himself. I have a life now, Ethan. In New York. Tommy's my world. I can't just. I'm not asking you to, Ethan said quickly. I just need you to know. I need to start being honest with you, with Clara, with everyone. James's eyes searched Ethan's, looking for the boy he'd loved all those years ago. He saw him there, beneath the polished exterior, still raw and real. What happens now? James asked. Ethan didn't have an answer, but as the stars burned above, he felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. The morning after the wedding that never was, Clara drove to her parents' house, an hour outside Richmond. The radio was off, the silence in her car a mirror to the chaos in her mind. She replayed Tommy's words, the way Ethan's face had changed when he looked at James. It wasn't just shock, it was recognition, like a door long locked had been flung open. Her parents' porch was a sanctuary of wicker chairs and potted ferns. Her mother, Ellen, took one look at Clara's red-rimmed eyes and pulled her into a hug. Oh, honey, she whispered, leading her inside. Over coffee, Clara told them everything. The interruption, Ethan's confession, the way the church had felt like a stage collapsing mid-performance. I thought I knew him, Clara said, her voice breaking. How could I miss this? Her father, a retired lawyer with a gentle demeanor, set down his mug. Love blinds us sometimes, Clara, but also shows us who we are. Ethan's got his own truth to face now. So do you? Clara nodded, but the words felt hollow. She wasn't angry. Not yet. She was hollowed out, like a tree after a storm. She needed answers, not from Ethan, but from herself. Who was she without him? The question gnawed at her as she drove back to her apartment, where photos of their life together mocked her from every wall. Meanwhile, Ethan and James took Tommy to a diner on the edge of town, a place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like home. Tommy colored on a placemat, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Ethan watched him, marveling at the boy's resilience. He's so much like you, Ethan said to James, a small smile tugging at his lips. James didn't return the smile. He's why I came back, you know. My sister, his mom, she's been struggling. I'm here to help her get back on her feet. I didn't expect this. Ethan nodded, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. I didn't either. But when Tommy ran in, it was like everything I've been running from caught up with me. James leaned back, his eyes guarded. You hurt me, Ethan. You hurt me so much I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again. And now you're sitting here, saying you love me. But what does that mean? You're engaged. You build a life without me. Ethan's throat burned. I know I don't deserve a second chance. I need to make this right. For Clara, for you, for myself. The diner's bell jingled as a couple walked in, laughing, their hands intertwined. Ethan and James both looked away, the sight too raw. Tommy, oblivious, held up his drawing, a house with 3 stick figures this time. This is us, he said proudly. You, me, and Uncle James. Ethan's heart clenched. He wanted that picture to be real, but the path to it was a minefield of pain and regret. Clara spent the next few days avoiding Ethan's calls. She needed space, time to untangle the knot of her emotions. She threw herself into work at the local library, where the quiet stacks offered solace. One afternoon, while shelving books, she found a worn copy of Giovanni's Room. The story of forbidden love and self-discovery hit too close to home. She sat in the break room, reading until tears blurred the pages. That evening, she called her best friend, Sarah, who drove over with a bottle of wine and a fierce determination to listen. You don't have to decide anything right now, Sarah said, pouring them each a glass. But you deserve someone who loves you completely, Clara. Not someone who's half in, half out. Clara nodded, but the words stung. She'd loved Ethan completely, hadn't she? Or had she loved the idea of him, the life they planned? The question kept her up at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering where she'd gone wrong. Across town, Ethan met James at a park where Tommy played on a swing set. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and possibility. I told Clara I need time, Ethan said, his voice low. I owe her an explanation, but I don't even know where to start. James pushed Tommy's swing, his movement steady. Start with the truth. Tell her who you are, Ethan, not who you think you should be. Ethan watched Tommy soar, his laughter cutting through the tension. I'm scared, he admitted. I've spent so long pretending, I don't know how to stop. James's hand stilled on the swing. You don't have to do it alone. For the first time, Ethan felt a spark of courage. He reached for James's hand, tentative, like a boy reaching for a dream. James didn't pull away. Clara stood outside Ethan's apartment, her fist hovering over the door. It had been a week since the wedding, and the silence between them was deafening. She'd spent days wrestling with her pride, her pain, her need for closure. Finally, she knocked, her heart pounding like a drum. Ethan opened the door, his face a mix of relief and dread. Clara, he said, stepping aside. Come in. The apartment felt foreign now, though she'd spent countless evenings here. The couch where they'd watched movies, the kitchen where they'd danced to old jazz records. It all felt like a set from someone else's life. They sat across from each other, the space between them heavy with unspoken words. I need to understand, Clara said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. Who is James to you? Ethan took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly. He was my first love, my only love before you. We were together in high school, but I ended it. I thought I had to fit in, to make my family proud. I've been lying to myself ever since. Clara's eyes burned, but she held his gaze. And me? Was I just a lie too? No, Ethan said fiercely. I love you, Clara. I do, but it's not the same. It's not enough. You deserve someone who can give you everything, and I can't. Not when I'm still in love with him. The words hit like a punch, but they also brought clarity. Clara stood, pacing the room. I wish you'd told me sooner. I wish you'd trusted me enough to be honest. I didn't trust myself, Ethan admitted. I thought I could be someone else. For you, for my dad, for this town. But I can't keep pretending. Clara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I need time, Ethan. I don't hate you, but I can't be around you right now. As she left, Ethan felt a strange mix of grief and relief. He'd hurt her, and that would haunt him. But for the first time, he'd spoken his truth, and it felt like breathing after years underwater. James took Tommy to visit his mother, Lily, who was recovering from a long battle with addiction. The small house smelled of lavender and second chances. Lily hugged Tommy tightly, her eyes shining with gratitude as she looked at James. "You've been his rock," she said. "I don't know how to thank you." "You're his mom," James said, ruffling Tommy's hair. "That's all he needs." Later, as Tommy played in the backyard, James sat with Lily on the porch. "What's going on with you and Ethan?" she asked, her voice gentle but direct. James sighed, staring at the horizon. "I don't know. Part of me wants to run back to New York and forget this ever happened. But when I look at him, it's like no time has passed. I'm still that kid who loved him." Lily reached for his hand. "You deserve to be happy, James. Whatever that looks like." That night, James met Ethan at a quiet bar on the outskirts of town. The jukebox played a soft country tune, and the dim light cast shadows on their faces. "I talked to Clara," Ethan said, his voice low. "I told her everything." James raised an eyebrow. "And she's hurt. She has every right to be. But I think she'll be okay. She's stronger than I ever was." James nodded, sipping his beer. "And you? What do you want, Ethan?" Ethan leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I want to stop hiding. I want to be with you, if you'll have me. But I know I've got a lot to make up for." James's heart raced. He wanted to believe Ethan, wanted to fall back into the love they'd once had. But trust was a fragile thing, and theirs had been shattered. "I need time," James said. "I need to know you mean it." Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. "I'll wait, as long as it takes." Clara started therapy, a small step toward healing. Her therapist, a kind woman with a knack for asking hard questions, helped her see that her worth wasn't tied to Ethan's choices. She began painting again, something she'd abandoned in the whirlwind of wedding planning. The colors on the canvas were her way of reclaiming herself, stroke by stroke. One evening, she ran into James at a coffee shop. The encounter was awkward, but not hostile. "I'm sorry," James said, his voice sincere. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Clara nodded, stirring her latte. "I know. I don't blame you. Or Ethan, really. I need to figure out who I am now." James smiled, a small, sad smile. "You're stronger than you think, Clara." As she walked home, Clara felt a flicker of something new. Hope, maybe, or the beginnings of forgiveness. Not for Ethan, but for herself. Months passed, and Ethan threw himself into rebuilding his life. He started attending a support group for LGBTQ+ people in Richmond, a place where he could finally say the words he'd buried for years. "I'm gay." The first time he said it aloud, his voice shook, but the room met him with nods and understanding. He began volunteering at a youth center, helping kids like Tommy navigate a world that wasn't always kind. He saw James and Tommy often at the park or the diner, small moments that felt like stepping stones. James was cautious, but he didn't pull away. They talked about everything: New York, Tommy's school, the way the stars looked brighter in Virginia. Slowly, trust began to rebuild, fragile but growing. One crisp autumn day, Ethan invited James and Tommy to the old oak grove where they'd spent so many nights as teenagers. Tommy ran ahead, chasing leaves, while Ethan and James walked side by side. "I used to dream about this place," Ethan said, his voice soft. "Us here without fear." James stopped, looking at the gnarled trees. "I did too, even after you broke my heart." Ethan reached for his hand, and this time, James let him. "I'm not that scared kid anymore," Ethan said. "I'm trying to be someone you can trust again." James's eyes softened, but he didn't speak. Instead, he squeezed Ethan's hand, a silent promise to keep trying. Clara's life was taking shape again. She'd moved to a new apartment, one filled with her paintings and no ghosts of Ethan. She started teaching art classes at the library, finding joy in watching kids discover their creativity. Sarah dragged her to a pottery workshop one weekend, and for the first time in months, Clara laughed until her sides ached. She still thought about Ethan, but the pain was duller now, like a bruise fading. She'd written him a letter, not to send, but to release. In it, she forgave him, not for his sake, but for hers. She burned it in her backyard, watching the flames carry her hurt away. One day, She saw Ethan at the grocery store, his cart filled with snacks for Tommy. They exchanged a quiet smile, no words needed. Clara felt a weight lift. She wasn't his fiancée anymore, but she was herself, and that was enough. Tommy's 7th birthday arrived, a sunny afternoon filled with balloons and cake. James and Ethan planned the party together, turning Lily's backyard into a wonderland of games and laughter. Tommy's friends ran wild, and Lily watched with tears in her eyes, grateful for her brother and the man who'd become part of their family. As the kids played, Ethan and James stole a moment by the fence. "I'm moving back to Virginia," James said, his voice steady. "For Tommy, for Lily, and for us." Ethan's breath caught. "You mean it?" James nodded, a smile breaking through. "I'm not saying it's easy, but I want to try. With you." They kissed, soft and tentative, under the shade of an oak tree. Tommy's cheer from across the yard broke the moment, and they laughed, their hands still entwined. For the first time, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The town was changing, slowly but surely. Ethan's father, Pastor Caldwell, had started attending a different kind of church, one that welcomed everyone, no exceptions. It wasn't easy for him, but he was trying, and Ethan met him halfway. They had coffee once a week, awkward at first, but each meeting chipped away at years of silence. James and Ethan began building a life together, step by step. They took Tommy to school, cooked dinners with Lily, and dreamed of a future that felt possible. The town still whispered, but the voices were quieter now, drowned out by the strength of their love. Clara found her own rhythm, her art gaining attention at local galleries. She dated again, cautiously, her heart open but wiser. She and Ethan became something like friends, their shared history a bridge rather than a wall. A year after the wedding that wasn't, Ethan stood on the hill where he and James had once made promises. The air was cool, the sky a canvas of stars. James was beside him, Tommy asleep in the car nearby. They'd come here after a long day, needing a moment to breathe, to remember. "I used to think love was supposed to be easy," Ethan said, his voice low. "But it's not. It's messy and hard and worth every second." James laughed, a sound Ethan had missed for years. "You're preaching to the choir." They sat on the grass, shoulders touching, the silence between them comfortable now. Ethan thought about Clara, who'd sent him a painting last week, a vibrant abstract that felt like her heart on canvas. He thought about Tommy, who'd started calling him Ethan instead of Mr. Ethan, a small shift that meant everything. He thought about his father, who'd hugged him last Sunday, a gesture that felt like a new beginning. "Marry me," Ethan said suddenly, the words spilling out before he could stop them. James turned, his eyes wide. "What? Not now," Ethan said, laughing nervously. "Someday, when we're ready, when Tommy's ready. I want you to know I'm all in." James's smile was slow, warm, like the sunrise. "Someday," he agreed, leaning in to kiss Ethan under the stars. The town held its first Pride event that spring, a small but vibrant gathering in the park. Ethan and James walked hand in hand, Tommy bouncing between them with a rainbow flag tied like a cape. Clara was there, selling her art at a booth, her smile bright as she waved them over. Pastor Caldwell stood on the sidelines, watching, a tentative step toward understanding. Tommy ran to the stage, where a band played upbeat music. He danced, wild and free, and Ethan felt his heart swell. This was the life he'd dreamed of as a boy, a life where love didn't have to hide. It wasn't perfect. There were still whispers, still challenges, but they faced them together. Clara joined them later, her laughter mingling with Tommy's. "You guys look happy," she said, and she meant it. "We are," Ethan said, his arm around James. "And you?" Clara's eyes sparkled. "Getting there." As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Ethan looked at his family, James, Tommy, even Clara, who'd become part of their story in a way he hadn't expected. Love, he realized, wasn't just about romance. It was about courage, about forgiveness, about building something real despite the odds. Tommy tugged at Ethan's sleeve, holding up a new drawing, 3 stick figures under a rainbow. "This is us," he said, his voice proud. Ethan knelt, pulling Tommy into a hug. "Yeah, buddy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is us." The music played on, the crowd cheered, and under the fading light, Ethan felt the weight of his past lift. He was home, not in a place, but in the people who loved him and in the truth he'd finally embraced.